Good morning, Samoa, and welcome to Star Trek Strange New Worlds, Season 2, Episode 6, Lost in Translation, where the habit is still there to want to say Picard. I never really had this for Prodigy, Lower Decks, Discovery. I did, but it would go away, after one or two episodes. But Picard, I really want to say welcome back to Star Trek Picard. Yes, Lost in Translation. I think this was the episode where finally I'm like, right, Strange New Worlds has found its footing. Like, I'm very comfortable in that. I think Strange New Worlds knows what it wants to do. It's gonna keep on doing that well. And I think Strange New Worlds and I have come to an understanding of, like, right, this is what this show does. This is how this show works. This is what it does well. I feel like I have a very good understanding of Strange New Worlds and what it could do that I can define a lot better. But, I mean, that's more... Oh, I am not recording. I've gotten bad at that. Getting back to the episode at hand, again, I thought that was a really good one. I thought that I'll even go so far as to say I think that was a pretty strong episode. There were a few moments here. Let's get the instructions off screen. There were a few little bits where I thought Uhura's actions seemed a bit odd, hardly anything breaking or like just completely unreasonable. And probably some other things I'll get into, but the focus is of course the characters. I mean, Uhura in particular, but we had a lot of people. Uhura, a bit of Leon, even some Kirk stuff, Una. I think that was all very solid. Right, no, I think I'm going to have to just address the high-level stuff first. I think Strange New Worlds, you know what, let's take a look at it, because I want to look at these Season 2 episodes, as of course I have my keyboard out of the way. Strange New Worlds, there we go. Who's watching? I'm watching. Here we go. I'm not going to stream anything I don't want to. There we go. We have the Strange New Worlds. No, we don't. What is this? That's not Strange New Worlds. Why am I on the Paramount Plus homepage? Strange New Worlds. There we go. These are the Strange New Worlds episodes. Broken Circle, what even was? That was alright. That was kind of a pretty standard Star Trek episode it was alright. I mean, its only complaint is it had a fight scene that went too long. Ad Astra per Aspera is probably the best episode we've had in 20 years. It's an amazing... social analysis, but also just character study of Una, and a lot of things. It was fantastic. Tomorrow was, again, I like that one a fair amount, despite its problems. It had a sort of general, it's the time travel episode, but with a lot of very strong deep character work with Leon. Actually, pretty much just Leon. Among the Lotus Eaters. Again, that was an interesting philosophical concept, which I really grasped onto. Charades. Serviceable. We said it was serviceable. I mean, again, among the Lotus Eaters, I think was pretty standard. It's just the philosophical... I really latched onto the concept. I was like, it made me think. And then we have Lost in Translation, which was, again, a fairly, I suppose, general plot line, but with a lot of strong character work. And there's a trend here, even less so if I go to Season 1, because there's not a lot of character-based stories. But the pattern we have in Season 1... Actually, it's easy. Let's just check that out. What was the strong one? Ghosts of Illyria was by far the best episode in Season 1, which did a lot of interesting character work with Una. It was sort of the prequel to the court case episode. And the others, I mean, there were highs and lows, but there's nothing I'd really consider stand out, and there wasn't really any of that strong character work, and I had a lot of complaints of underlying problems, how they were dealing with some certain things. I'll get into this more. But the trend is, if it's not clear enough already, what Strange New Worlds is great at is those very character-driven and emotional storytelling. I think it's clear at this point that Strange New Worlds is really good at doing those kinds of stories. I think they probably realized this between seasons 1 and 2 and leaned into that hard season 2. And I imagine this is largely what Stranger Worlds is going to look like going forward. And when it comes to what you might consider a more traditional, standard kind of Star Trek episode, they are, or even necessarily those elements in an episode, they are serviceable at best, and that is a very nice serviceable that is not going to acknowledge the at worst case. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of reasons for this, but and it's not always a bad thing. I want to point this out. I'm probably going to say there were some plot-based things that I'm not a huge fan of in this episode. As always, there's going to be stuff it's going to contradict with Strange New Worlds. Might even contradict Lower Decks. I don't remember when Kirk and Spock supposedly carved their names into that bar bench, but I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt when I can't remember. But, yeah, the way the writers handle canon doesn't gel well with a franchise, and particularly one with how Star Trek has typically dealt with it. But with a sort of general plot, like a basic plot or even some things that are resolved kind of quickly aren't always really a big deal if you're doing a character-based episode, and that is all very strong. Like, the plot is all kind of background secondary. Now, there were still some good things in this plot. I liked when they went and saw Sam. You know, it's really kind of this part. I wasn't thinking too much about the mystery because I knew I didn't have all the pieces to, like, hear. But once the episode kindly was, like, sat down and went, right, we're going to start solving the mystery, it was what I like most, where I am either right with or immediately behind the characters in a mystery. That's why Season 3 of Enterprise works so well, because for the entire season, I am either exactly with or, like, seconds behind what the character's knowledge is, because I've realized something, like, a split second before they have. Where, yeah, there's kind of the realization of, like, oh, it's communication, and they're communicating death. Like, that's the tie between the two. I mean, that became very clear. The tie between her and this other person was death, like, in this scene. But then the realization of it's communication, the message they're trying to get across is death. Yes, something about whatever, the collection thing is killing people who live in the nebula. Like, that was well done. Also not the focus of the episode. It's good when they're both well done. Like, ideally, everything of an episode, regardless of its focus, would be amazing. That's how you get those, like, true standouts of television. Like the, court case. I've already forgotten. Ad aspa per aspa. You know, stuff like that. But, you know, you have limited time. You have limited resources. You are not a master of everything as a writer. So, you know, yeah. But yeah, I was gripped by the episode. I feel like I was invested in, I was about to say everybody's arcs. I can't say I was the strongest investment in Sam and Kirk's little sibling rivalry, but neither was the episode, to be fair. I liked a bit of the end, you know. But yeah, I was invested in the characters. I care about them, which was my biggest complaint about Season 1, is I didn't really care about most of the characters, especially the original ones, because they just weren't doing anything with them. Yeah, I like that it built off, the relationship we already had between Hemmer and Uhura, who I've still never seen his death scene, by the way. I still have never seen the last few minutes of the episode where they murder babies. I was going to call it the Gorn episode, but then I remembered that it's the episode where they murder babies, and I'm going to call it that. Yeah, I think we'll probably just go by scene by scene. Unfortunately, the episode that Strange New Worlds is really good at, and I want them to keep making, I find a lot harder to review than something like Prodigy Lower Decks Discovery. I mean, the other shows. But no, this is the one where it all clicked. And it's like, right, I can see the patterns, I can see what you're good at, and I understand why you're good at what you are, and why you're not good at what you're not good at. So yeah, I mean, this was good as well. I like that it looked like, oh, her is hearing something in the communications, but it's not, it's actually she's hearing it. She just happened to have the headphones in. I like that twist. I did like a lot of the development of the plot. I think that was really solid. My only real criticisms kind of with the plot are, I think there's like 2 or 3 decisions this one Uhura makes that are strange. Like, she realizes she can't have deuterium poisoning because she was hallucinating before going to the nacelle, which for some reason is where the communications array runs through. I don't understand that bit, but I also don't know why they wire the starship how they do, so, I'll allow it. Why does she go to Spock? It was a similar thing I had, actually, in the last episode, where Chapel steals a shuttle, Chapel, Uhura, and Ortega's, and it's like, why don't you go to Pike? Because they would probably be on board with that. She doesn't go to her doctor and say, Doctor, I was having these symptoms before deuterium poisoning. I can't have deuterium poisoning. She goes to Spock. I don't, like, maybe she wanted a logical opinion. It just, that one felt weird, and I couldn't really understand the motivation behind it. And then when she punched Kirk, and they're both like, let's not go to sickbay. You don't want that on your record. It's like, why? I mean, she's medically unfit for duty. There was another guy who just sabotaged a very important Federation project. I'm pretty sure that would be considered an act of terrorism, and nobody cares because he's hallucinating and going through the same thing Uhura is. Granted, they don't know that here, but my point is there's plenty of precedent to get off scot-free with essentially terrorism because you weren't in the right frame of mind. But no, those are like really my 2 things. I liked everything else. I really liked Kirk in this episode. I'll have to go through when I'm watching TOS more and kind of see if I can see these elements of Kirk in there. I believe they are in Kirk, but the way he kind of, he looks after Uhura. I mean, he's a good person. He's essentially a model person in this kind of scenario. And I don't think TOS Kirk was ever as successfully comforting as Paul Wesley's Kirk. But I mean, I'm liking it. I'm liking seeing it. And if we're saying this is more Kirk, how he would be without a lot of the problematic 60s stuff, or even explaining, like, this is kind of why, when we see Kirk later in TOS, he's the kind of guy who rocks up to a planet and absolutely throws it into chaos. That bit about, he can't, what did Leon say? It's like, you're the kind of person who can never resist lending a helping hand to someone in need or something like that. I kind of helps in the stuff with his father. Like, why was his father never around as a kid? Because he was going and helping, and he thinks that's really important. Now, it's more a story of someone, in TOS at least, fundamentally misunderstanding what help actually is, rocking up to planets and, I mean, probably killing the entire populations, just deciding that you're right, they're wrong, and you're going to impose their will. But that's not Strange New Worlds' fault. That's TOS's fault. This Kirk is very much not that kind of person. Pike, on the other hand, is, but... yeah, it's never gonna feel like Kirk. But I realized something. They didn't cast Paul Wesley to look like Kirk. They cast Paul Wesley to be this guy's brother. Hang on, let's get that side by side, because as soon as I saw this, I'm gonna wait till they both start walking to the camera. That's good enough. Look at that. I'd believe that. Alex, these two guys. Anything?
Wario and Waluigi. He looks like Robotnik from the Sonic movies.
He does. I think I've said that before, but they very easily could be brothers.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's why I said Wario and Waluigi.
That's why Kirk looks like that, because this is Kirk's brother, and so they've cast a Captain Kirk to look like the brother they already had.
Why didn't they cast Kirk that looked like Kirk and then cast somebody who looked like Kirk?
Well, they didn't have Kirk. I guess Kirk was technically in season 1. But I saw that and I went, oh, that's what you've done. Which, fair enough. But the main problem, Paul Wesley is never going to work for me, is the voice. And part of that is that audio recording has come a long way in the past 60 years. A lot of the TOS cast, I mean, this is true for Uhura as well, are never going to sound like the original actors because there isn't that kind of 60s, 70s audio quality that's in a lot of actors' voices I think of from back then. But the combination of not the right voice and not the right look, I mean, it's the thing I've said before, I can factually accept this as James T. Kirk, but watching it, I'm never really going to have a strong association between the guy in front of me now and the guy, who was William Shatner going around and doing those things, which actually works in the show's favor. I think it's going to make TOS a bit worse retrospectively, but welcome to Strange New Worlds, through contradictions, but it means that I'm not going to be as focused on, well, hang on, that's not quite like Kirk. That might not be quite what Kirk would do, or this contradicts something Kirk did, because it's more similar to two different people in my head than the same person. Even though factually, I'm like, yeah, I know this is Kirk. But I'm not constantly watching the show going, I know this is Kirk, I know this is Kirk, I know this is Kirk. But, by and large, I'm positive with what they're doing with Kirk. I wouldn't have put him in the show anyway. I was going to say, but I admit there's some things that I like they're doing and they can only do with Kirk. That's not true. You could swap Kirk with any random officer and still have these storylines work. The one problem with Kirk in this episode is I have an incredibly low opinion of the captain of the Farragut. Why is he not involved in this in any way whatsoever? Like, did I miss a line that he was sick or something? Because Kirk isn't even the first officer yet. He is going to be the first officer. We might be able to assume he's the second officer, but, so was Data, and he just... What did Data do, actually? What does Operations do? I don't know. He just kind of does whatever none of the other stations do. I've never really noticed that before. We need someone to scan the asteroid. Well, who's going to do that? None of the stations are there. Well, that's why we wrote Ops. Huh. But anyway, yeah, I get why Kirk is involved in the Uhura stuff. That makes sense. But, when they realize that this thing happening to Uhura is the same thing happening, that there's some greater conspiracy that the entire project might be in threat. If I was the captain of the Farragut, I might actually start stepping in and, go meet with Pike. But no, let's send Kirk. Practice for his first officer position? I don't know. Maybe the Farragut captain's more of a Picard type, but I feel even Picard would have stepped in and been like, right, it's time to maybe get a bit involved in this situation. Yeah, again, props to Uhura instantly going to sickbay. Like the moment there was an issue, that is always a pet peeve of mine. You lose some points for her going to Spock and not sickbay later in the episode, but if Stranger World has done anything great, it's that there's not a single instance of someone not going to sickbay. Oh, hang on, I just realized, is this where her parent shuttle crashed from the beginning of the episode? I think it is, but we don't really see too much of it. I also thought, yes, I've passed it. I really liked the cold open of this episode. Especially the sort of like zombie hammer thing. I liked the unsettling, I'm going to call them horror aspects, even though this definitely was not a horror episode. There was, I don't know, a certain chill to a lot of it that I think I really enjoyed it. The noise that Uhura was hearing was very well sound designed. Like, it was a sort of, it could be a language, some sort of like machine alien-y language, or it could just be like machinery sounds, like what the Transformers make. It could just be a noise. It was a very well designed sound. And it really reminded me of the Orville scene that I adore. Is season 1. If you've not seen it, I don't know what episode. Maybe mute it. Mute it until we come back. Here's your mute warning, because genuinely it's one of like my favorite scenes I've ever seen in television, where one of the security officer is like, this is the cold open, I think, but they're walking around and they see like a terrifying nightmare clown in the corridors, and you know it freaks them out because there's not supposed to be like a nightmare clown on the starship. And they freak out, and so they go to the captain, and it's like the very standard, like, Captain, I know this sounds crazy, but I saw a nightmare clown. And everyone's like, well, you're hallucinating. He's like, look, I know I probably am, and this is crazy, but like it's really unsettling. And they're just trying to like comfort the crew member who's obviously hallucinating the nightmare clown on the starship, because the nightmare, it's a clown. They're in space. How does a nightmare clown get on the starship? And someone's like, you know what? If it makes you feel better, let's just go. Let's look at the security footage. Just convince yourself there was no clown, and then we'll take you to sickbay to deal with this. And they go to so they go to the console. They like type in the security footage, and it pops up, and you see him standing there in the corridor, but you also see the nightmare clown. Like, and you're like, oh, she wasn't hallucinating. There was a nightmare clown on the ship.
I'm sorry, I keep hearing the words nightmare
It's
clown.
amazing. It's an amazing scene that, like, kind of it goes against a lot of tropes. It's a brilliant scene. I got those vibes from this episode, which is good, because anything that reminds me, okay, not anything, but if you can kind of invoke those same feelings of like an amazing scene, I'm like, yeah, I got those same vibes. They're doing something different. And I don't really like horror in like shows and stuff, or you know, I just don't do horror well. But there's also like I love Doctor Who, and a lot of the best Doctor Who episodes are horror. Like, not even in a Strange New World, it's not really horror way, but in like, no, that actually was a horror episode. Yeah, it was very well done. I mean, a lot of this is very well done. Yeah, I'm just so happy with the direction Stranger Worlds has gone in. Moving on. Yeah, I thought this was a bit weird, how resistant she was to a chief engineer's recommendation, but the ending justifies it. Like, this was really good. I almost wonder if we're gonna get more stuff with the crew kind of getting over Hammer, or at the very least accepting Paella. This is what happens when you only give her like 10 minutes of screen time. But Paella? I don't remember. Like, it didn't quite feel like a conclusion to me. Like, now the crew's either accepting Hammer's death or being aware that it was an issue, and they can start dealing with it and start accepting the new chief engineer. But I'm not sure how much he's really going to be here. I was reading a lot of interesting stuff. She kind of feels wasted because I think the character's great. I wish she was a little less of an actual criminal stealing, plundering priceless artifacts. That painting she had in one of the previous episodes, the one where they go to Canada, is an actual missing painting. It is like one of the greatest art heists of the 20th century that genuinely was stolen from the Louvre. But, that has some implications. Like, she's actually... whatever. But, she doesn't get any screen time. She's hardly in the episodes. Even, like, the one relationship we set up in the beginning that she knew Amanda... well, the episode that had Amanda, they're like, I'm sorry, Carol Kane was, I don't know, busy for this episode. And I'm a little worried that she's only going to be kind of a one-season thing because bringing in Scotty is very much a Strange New Worlds thing to do. I don't want them to bring in Scotty, and I feel like there's more we can do with this character. Especially inventing an entire race of aliens that lived on Earth until, like, the Enterprise era. Like, the founding of the Federation completely undetected, just so you can give them a combined 40 minutes of screen time across a season. That's an interesting choice, but I guess we'll just have to see how they go. Going on a bit more... it really is a shame. This style of storytelling I find so hard to review, or rather these kinds of stories. But here's another odd bit of the plot, where, like, they just saw this guy and knew he was the saboteur, which was kind of just glossed over, but it's not super important. It's not the focus of the episode. I think I more want to talk about some broader things of Strange New Worlds. But yeah, Pike, I'll actually say, I think Pike is really redeeming himself as a captain this season. Pike and I have a weird relationship. I'm very different to a lot of people, fans, who absolutely adore everything about Strange New Worlds. In Discovery, Season 2, Pike, like, ended the argument Kirk versus Picard because it clearly wasn't Kirk anymore. If anything, it's Pike versus Picard. Like, he was one of the best Starfleet officers we've ever seen. And he was amazing. In part because at that point, all we had of modern Star Trek was the first 2 seasons of Discovery, and there was not a single Starfleet officer in those seasons. Just the characters weren't very Star Trek. You were there. And he was fantastic. But also, he was just genuinely a very good character. He was a great Starfleet-like character. He made a fantastic first impression, and he was very good that whole season. Season 1 of Strange New Worlds, he started off the same. I mean, he's still pretty much the same character. But certain oddities started becoming patterns of behavior for me. Season 2 also has the Sound of Thunder, Season 2 of Discovery, which is the one where they go to, like, Saru's planet, there's the Baul, and, all that junk, which was at the time the single worst and most immoral episode of Star Trek I had ever seen. I can't fathom why people like it. That's not the point of this review, but it was a display of incredible gross negligence and incompetence to me. That became kind of the norm, where, to me, Pike would often not take his job seriously when at times he really should. It was the thing I was saying a few episodes ago, where I was watching TNG, and that alien was critiquing Riker, where he's like, he doesn't take things seriously, he jokes around, he has a lot of levity, and the whole point was the alien was wrong. But I'm like, yes, that's why Riker works, is all that stuff that Pike also has. I mean, he's Pizza Riker, just at an earlier period of Riker's life. Riker has, but then when things get serious, Riker, I mean, I'm sure you can picture Riker's, like, serious face when suddenly the Borg cube shows up, and Riker is not a jovial, lighthearted, joking around kind of guy. Like, Lower decks he is maybe a little bit, but, he knows when the situation's serious and when it's time to be in serious mode. Pike never had that. Pike didn't have a serious mode, and he and his crew were lighthearted at times when, like, entire civilizations were at stake, and he very quickly fell, in my eyes. This Pike, I mean, I think he's getting involved at the right times. I think he's doing much better knowing when the situation is actually serious, and I'm really getting back to some of those, like, wow, this is an amazing captain vibes from Discovery. And I genuinely hadn't realized that until right now, like, starting to talking about it. But that is another positive. I think Stranger Worlds, they did sit down and go, right, what worked, what didn't, what's our, like, joke to serious ratio. They had the meeting. As much as all the, like, press releases where everyone involved with Stranger Worlds was saying, Season 2, we're going to do just like Season 1 because you all loved it. Yeah, that was a bold-faced lie. Like, the more just because it sounds good. The more complicated thing is we're going to do everything that worked about Season 1, and they really sat down and went, yes, here's how we make our show better. Like, the same but better, kind of. Well done. Moving on. Yeah, Kirk's decision to leave or let Uhura go on her own would have been one of those very odd decisions, but it looks like that is sickbay. Oh, hang on. There we go. That is sickbay, like right here. So it's understandable more. And we finally saw this Jeffries tube. Well done. That little weird curve thing. Actually, I want to get a closer look at this Jeffries tube. That's the one thing Strange New Worlds has been missing. Come on, Uhura. Open it up. Yes, I'm fixated on the Jeffries tube. Actually, I asked this question, didn't I, in another review. In the 60s, these weren't flush with the wall, because the wall is curved, and it looks kind of funny. And I was like, I wonder if Strange New Worlds will make them flush. I think they are, but they're blurry, so we can pretend they're not. I don't care either way, but I genuinely, this might be the best recreation of a set they've ever done, is this Jeffries tube. This frame is what I want the interior of the Strange New Worlds Enterprise to be. It is the classic one, but just a little, like, it's not gonna fall over if you lean on it kind of look. This looks like Star Trek. Most of the rest of the quarters look a lot more like a generic clinical white. Like, this screenshot has carpet just out of frame. That's the kind of vibe I want. Did the TOS have carpet? I can't remember now, but I think it did, yeah. And I don't think there is too much. Yeah, I did have a realization right at the end that kind of brought a different tone to the episode, where eventually, in less than a decade or so, Uhura is going to forget all of this. And she's going to forget her parents and her family and literally everything about herself. The plot point that you might get easily forgotten is in the episode with Nomad. Nomad completely wipes Uhura's brain of all knowledge. Like, that's gonna... I feel like that remembering that is gonna affect how I watch all of Strange New Worlds. Kind of like this is all stuff she forgets. We're now kind of learning more of her background. And, like, this tragic death of her family... I mean, she's not gonna care about those people. She's not gonna know who they are. Which I don't really know how to say about, like, it doesn't change the episode so much. These things still happen to Uhura. If anything, it just means Uhura dies in about 10 years. And they don't really change anything after TOS, because we already knew that she just casually lost all of her memories and never got them back. But seeing them both I don't know, it just was like, I don't know, that feels like even more horrific now somehow, just seeing scenes like this. Not that Uhura is gonna care after the memory wipe, because, she's a different person, but this was great. I don't remember any bad blood between Kirk and Sam from TOS. Maybe there was some in the, all of 5 lines of dialogue that describe their relationship. I've just realized, how old was Sam's kid? We've got to be getting pretty close to Sam needing to have that kid in order for them to actually grow up by season 3 of TOS. I think that's about 13 years away. I don't know. But this was great. I loved him just staring at Kirk, getting more and more like, say thank you, Kirk. Say thank you. It'd be interesting if maybe there's stuff you could explore, with that, the brother who is the eye of, everything the dad envisions a success, and then the other one isn't. There's some interesting stuff you can explore there, especially, that's not Kirk's fault. But also Kirk could do more for his brother to be like, yeah, our dad's an asshole, but, that's not I don't know. It's interesting stuff you can explore, but also, I kind of think less Kirk in Stranger Worlds is better. Stranger Worlds needs to stand with its own characters and do more of its own things. And one of the things Stranger Worlds is still bad at, and will probably always be bad at, is, God dang it, the Paramount, is, I was trying to find a flattering frame. There we go. Is canon. The guy in charge and seemingly everyone who works on it has it's not they're bad at canon because they're not trying. They are trying very hard, but I think they have a view of how the canon should be that fundamentally disagrees with me. And I don't think it gels well with how it's been handled from the next generation through to now, with the exception of Early Discovery, which production-wise was an absolute mess, so that kind of makes sense. Well, through to now, except Stranger Worlds, of course. They have a very, I think, Doctor Who view of canon. It's very interesting because my 2 big shows are Star Trek and Doctor Who, which in some ways are similar. They're both science fictions that tend to lean into more liberal ideas. They're both big franchises. There are a lot of similarities. They can be divided up into sort of different eras, we'll use the term. But in other ways, they could not be more different. Because Star Trek has always had a very strict definition of canon. On screen equals canon, canon equals on screen is the big one. But to the point of even then, there are still arguments as to whether or not Lower Decks is canon, because one time Gene Roddenberry said he didn't like the animated series and so the animation wasn't canon. And there's still push that, Lower Decks and Prodigy aren't canon because they're animated, or, it's a fascinating world of, a very strict, controlled, which has its benefits. We're all hopefully on the same page. But the BBC with Doctor Who, their official statement on canon is, what's canon is, I don't know, what do you think? And they have such an expansive media. The Big Finish audio ranges, there are literally more of those than there are televised Doctor Who. There are countless comics, countless books. Do you think of a media? Doctor Who exists on it, and there's a lot of it. Vinyl Record has, some unique vinyl record Doctor Who stories. And it has a canon. People who claim it doesn't have a canon are either operating on a vastly, mind-bogglingly different definition to canon than myself and anyone else I've heard, or don't understand the concept of canon enough to make that claim. But it's a very loose one from the beginning. I mean, every episode, for the most part, takes place in a different place or time. They're all very disconnected other than the main characters, the Doctor and the Companion. There have been contradictions nearly since the start, and even worse over time. We have episodes set in 2012 that were made in 2012 that are basically the modern-day Earth, but governments know about aliens. They're just a secret. And we have episodes from the 60s that are set in 2012 where, like, a Mexican agricultural businessman basically controls the world by controlling the volcanoes and attempts to do a coup by blowing up all the volcanoes to become a world dictator. That didn't happen, and it didn't happen in, like, Doctor Who's 2012, but it also did. It's, like, a very weird mix. And the people writing Strange New Worlds very much, I think, have a canon view that fits more with Doctor Who, where you have these big, kind of personal canon within their own show. They do break that. But, they're a lot more loose in letting it change with the times, change with other things. But Doctor Who can get away with it because, for one, it has pretty much always been like that. Not day one, but even from day one, there's always been a sort of disconnected nature to a lot of the episodes. There's no overarching world. They don't stick around in any place. By the time they were sticking around in places, there were already the contradictions. And Doctor Who is just Doctor Who. There are some spin-offs, but it has almost always been, that one show about the one guy. Now it's a guy. But with Star Trek, that view doesn't gel so much, where there are the other series that have to be dealt with. There's been a very strong general consistency, at least since TNG. I'm even saying at least since the movies, actually. TOS is really the kind of ugly duckling of canon. But, the effects in Strange New Worlds has effects everywhere, and the playing a lot more fast and loose with the rules has never really been how Star Trek has worked, and the times it's tried to veer into that have always been resistant. I mean, remember when Enterprise had the Temple Cold War stuff as an excuse to say, the canon never happened. Well, look at how well that went for Enterprise. Look at how well that went for the network. But yeah, the benefit is the focus on the character-driven stories generally doesn't seem to damage as much. But, I mean, there's the things they'll do. Like, last episode, they just invented a highly advanced ancient society that had lived in the Vulcan system because the plot needed the Enterprise to be in the Vulcan system. And it introduced a lot of problems. Like, you're telling me that for the past, millennium, they've just never investigated that, and we've never heard of this civilization, and, it can still introduce problems, but I do think that these character-focused episodes generally don't have to deal with canon as much, so we don't introduce one of the fundamental flaws I said had in Stranger World Season 1 had. And it still does, but I'm gonna call it fundamentally flawed. It's not a fundamental flaw of the series, though, because it doesn't come up too often. It's a lot less prevalent, but it is fundamentally flawed when it exists. But yeah, I'm very happy that you've just had your talking to. That's the face of someone who's like, you try writing Star Trek. You know what? If I wrote Star Trek, it would be two things. It would be a hell of a lot worse than it is now, and it would be a hell of a lot more consistent than it is now in terms of canon. I am not a writer, but, I've always said before, that's important. I could not write this good. There are very few episodes of television I've ever seen and gone, I can do this better. And, like, the 3 that do exist are all written by Chris Chibnall. But it's very easy to point at something and improve it, because very few things are literally perfect. And it's often easier to understand or point out, this is where you've gone wrong, and this is how it's gone wrong, and I don't know how you would have made it right. But also, I didn't choose to be a writer. I chose to be a reviewer and a software engineer, so... yeah, I don't think there's too much. I'm sure the executives would love to have me talk about the historic first meeting between Kirk and Spock. I don't care. I mean, yeah, they are 2 characters who met at some point. If anything, I'm like, this is a frame now containing entirely TOS cast. All you're missing is bones, and I'd throw my hands in the air and say, we finally abandoned Strange New Worlds, welcome to TOS 2. Oops. Shoot, I was messing with a pen, and then I threw the cap on the floor. There we go. Yeah, it is odd seeing the 3 of them together. All of them not the original actors. But yeah, I'm warming up. I know, I think recasts are something I can only ever truly accept if it's just audio. Because I've been doing the Big Finish, like, Third Doctor stuff, where everybody in that is a recasted voice. The Doctor, the Companions, the Brigadier, everyone's a recast. But they're all really good recasts, and when it's just kind of the one element, and it's the voice, and it's like, you sound exactly like the other person, so you might as well be the other person, like, then I can do it, but, I don't know, I'll always be against recasts. Not as an absolute. There is no absolute in this world other than the fact that there are no absolutes. But, very seldom. Like, it'd have to be a character like Pike, where it's like they basically weren't in any episodes. You know, you basically weren't even a character to begin with. But I think that's probably going to wrap things up for this episode. Very good. It's unfortunate. I don't know. I really find it hard to review these kinds of episodes. These character-driven, emotional things. Maybe it's not a good idea to pivot into Russell T Davies' Doctor Who if Star Trek ever goes under then, but I hope people still enjoy them. I'm enjoying the episodes, which I suppose is the most important part. Yeah, I mean, great. Oh, next week is the Lower Decks crossover. That's gonna be something. You're absolutely right. Thank you. I wonder which part I was right about. The voice actors, the recasts, enjoying Strange New Worlds. I understand what it's like now when someone replies to something a streamer says, and it's like, I know what they said. And then the streamer's like, I've got no idea what you're talking about. I'm going to take that as just in general. Everything I say is absolutely right. But no, Lower Decks, that's going to be an interesting one. Some people have seen the episode. They aired it early at San Diego Comic-Con. I can only assume because none of their actors can actually talk about Star Trek and they need something. There's no absolutes. Thank you. You know what I love the most about that statement? Is the statement, there are no absolutes, is an absolute. And so the statement is its own contradiction. Like, it's just it's the perfect little proof of how there can never be absolutes. I love that statement. But, yes, some people have seen the Lower Decks episodes. It was an early screening at San Diego Comic-Con, or there will be. I don't know the dates. It might not have happened yet. So that means no internet for the next week. That's going to be an interesting one. I'm a lot more confident now than I was at the start of the season, because it looks like Strange New Worlds really has learned from all the problems I had in Season 1 that were why I was concerned about a Lower Decks crossover. I think it's going to be interesting. I think it should be fun. I really hope my package arrives before the live stream, before Friday, for the thumbnail of the episode, because there's a special thumbnail, and I had to spend like $40 shipping to get it here fast enough. I didn't know it would take a month to prepare. But, I'm looking forward to it. It's those old scientists. I did check Memory Alpha. The synopsis is it's the Lower Decks crossover. Package is arriving the 24th and 26th. Let's hope one of those are the package I need. That's going to be an interesting. But yeah, beware that stay off the internet, stay away from the Star Trek circles. That I mean, like Star Trek Reddit's probably going to be hard. You know, being like, hey, spoilers. Like, all the communities are going to be like, I didn't go to San Diego. I didn't see the episode. You're going to be quiet and sit down. But that should be a big event, and that should be interesting. The first crossover since... Well, these are the Voyages, I guess. I'm not counting Season 2 of Discovery. That's right? I think that's the first crossover, unless you count the Temporal Investigations person from a few episodes ago. But that's going to be fun. And hopefully I have a bit more to talk about, as it'll probably be a bit more of a Lower Decks-y type of episode. And final bit of news. I did see confirmation that they are going to be selling a Blu-ray and DVD of Star Trek Prodigies, episodes 11 to 20. There is a digital. You can buy them digitally right now. I don't know where. Just Google it. But it looks like it can be legally secured, at least very soon. I think that comes out in September. And I was wondering, why don't they just release Season 2 as like a direct-to-DVD? It'd be kind of weird, but if it's done already, presumably they were going to make a DVD because the first one was successful enough to justify making the part 2 of the first season. They've made Blu-rays for every other Star Trek. Like, I would have assumed you'd need to order the Blu-rays or kind of get a deal set up well before you actually do the printing. It seems feasible that if they wanted to, they could release Prodigy as a direct-to-Blu-ray Season 2. It'd be very difficult for me to figure out how to review. But, yeah, I mean, it'd be a lot of demand if that's the only way to do it. I don't know. It was a thought I had. I thought that could be very interesting. A direct-to-Blu-ray release in 2023 of a major sci-fi series. An award-winning series. Has there ever been a direct-to-DVD TV show? Hang on. I'm gonna look that up. I was gonna wrap it up, but I want to know now. That would be fantastic. Has there ever been a direct-to-DVD TV show? Direct-to-DVD? Surely not. That's the one absolute in the universe. There's no direct-to-DVD. Television show. Ooh. A production studio may decide not to generally release a TV show or film. Low budget, lack support from a TV. Oh, so there presumably has. I'm not. Come on, let's get this petition started. Like, if no one picks it up, Star Trek Prodigy direct to DVD. That would be something. I would wave that in the faces of all the people who say Blu-ray is antiquated so hard. I will never let them live that down. Even if it ever becomes antiquated, I would never let them live that down. But anyway, I think I'm going to end it there, as you now have a petition to go get Star Trek Prodigy released to deck to Blu-ray. Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you next time.